24 Effective Closing Techniques by Brian Tracy. The more closing techniques you know, the more likely it is that you will close the sale in the course of the sales interview. Selling is a skill. Good salespeople are made, not born. Most of the most successful salespeople in America were at one time shy, insecure, and clumsy at selling. They became great salespeople by learning and practicing the essential skills of selling, including how to close the sale. And if you do what they do, you'll be successful too, and nothing can stop you. Now let's begin. First things first, you are about to learn 24 of the most effective closing techniques ever discovered. Before we start talking about the closes, I'd like to talk about the antecedents to closing. One of Murphy's laws is that before you do anything, you have to do something else first. Before you close the sale, you have to do several other things first. Here are the two psychological antecedents to closing. You must know and use these if you want to be effective. The first requirement, which you've heard 1,000 times, is enthusiasm. 51% of all closing effectiveness comes from your enthusiasm, your excitement about your product and service. One of the best definitions I've ever heard of closing is that it is a transfer of enthusiasm. In other words, when you successfully transfer your enthusiasm about your product and service into the mind of the prospect, he or she will buy and a sale takes place. Believe in what you sell. It is essential that you have enough enthusiasm to transfer a sufficient amount into the mind of the other person. What this means is that the most effective salespeople know their product, they believe in their product, and they love their product. They really believe that their product has very worthwhile benefits for their customer. If you don't believe in your product, if you don't love your product, if you couldn't use it yourself, if you couldn't sell it to your best friend or your mother, then you're probably selling the wrong product. Without this deep belief in the goodness of what you're selling, you can never reach the level of enthusiasm that must be transferred into the mind of the prospect to make them want to buy. By the way, I don't mean the rah jumping around the type of enthusiasm. I mean what is called constrained enthusiasm. This is when your enthusiasm is kept inside you like a kettle, a boiling kettle with the lid put on it so that you literally shine with enthusiasm. You seem to have a dynamic tension, an excitement about you, but it isn't in how fast you talk or how quickly you move. It's contained within your source of power. Constrained enthusiasm has one of the most powerful effects of all on other people, more than you can imagine. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Nothing great was ever accomplished without enthusiasm. Expect the best." The second psychological quality you are required is confident expectations. You must confidently expect that the person is going to say yes. If you just ask often enough. When you ask the prospect to buy, you must confidently expect them to buy. For example, you ask expectantly, would you like the red one or the green one today? In other words, you don't ask, are you going to take one or not? Or is this what you had in mind? Is that you ask for the sale expectantly, and the more confidently you expect, to sell, the more likely it is that you will sell. Confidence in selling comes from knowledge, it comes from practice, it comes from experience, and it comes from believing that the product can do what you say that the product will do. Confidence shows when you confidently expect the prospect to buy. Qualifying the prospect. In the process of selling, there are several other steps that you must take before you close. The first step, of course, is qualifying. You cannot sell a product until you have thoroughly qualified the prospect. Every one of us has been in a situation where we have walked into a store or onto a used car lot, and somebody comes up and says, why don't you check it? Or are you going to buy it today? They try to close you without ever asking you what it is you want or what you need. They forget to qualify. 4 questions for qualifying. To qualify effectively, you have to find the answers to 4 questions. Question number 1. Does the prospect need what you're selling? Question number 2. Can the prospect use what you're selling? Many people may need a piece of high-tech equipment, but they may not be able to use it because of the people or the structure of the organization. Number 3. Can the people afford the product? And number 4. Does the person want the product? Desire comes before closing. Before you can close, the prospect has to have demonstrated that he or she has a desire to enjoy the benefits of your product or service. Once you've given your presentation, qualified the prospect in all 4 of these categories, and determined that he or she wants to buy it, you're in a position to begin closing. Much of the sale is made in the presentation. In some products, especially in real estate, the close is largely determined by how well you present the product to the prospect. Why the close is difficult? The moment of closing is always difficult. There is always a moment of tension. There is always a feeling of stress on the part of the prospect. This is a form of buyer's remorse. In advance, whenever a prospect reaches a point where he has to make an important decision, whenever he has to spend money, tension wells up inside of him. He experiences the fear of failure. Every one of us as human beings experiences this fear of failure. The tension in the closing moments of the sale is caused by the fear of paying too much, the fear of being criticized by other people. What happens when a person feels this fear? It is very much like having a spear in the stomach. What do they do as a result? They back away. Whenever he experiences this fear, he retreats. He says things like, "Let me think it over," or "Can you leave me some material?" or "Could you call me back next week? I have to talk it over with someone else. I have to check it out first. I can't afford it," and so on. These are all different ways that the prospect tells you that I don't think if I make this decision, it be the right thing for me. These are all different ways that the prospect tells you that I don't think if I make this decision, it be the right thing for me. The fear of rejection. The second major stumbling block at the close is the fear of rejection. It's the fear of the prospect saying no. Each of us, deep down inside, has a fear of being told no, a fear of being rejected. Because of this fear, we very cleverly organize our lives in such a way that we don't put ourselves in front of people that say no. And by the way, if you have a problem with the word no, you've picked a very interesting profession to get into. Because 4 out of 5 sales calls end with no's, even in the very best of times. In the finest economy, with the finest product, 80% of the people you talk to are going to say no. One of the key factors in successful selling is to be prepared to hear a no and continue. When the prospect says, "No, I don't think so," you must be able to just let it roll off your back like water off a duck's back. Rejection is not personal. You must realize that a no is not personal. It is not aimed at you as an individual. When a person says no to you, they're not saying no to you in most cases. They're saying no to your offering for a series of reasons, most of which you can do nothing about. Your job is to face your fear, confront your fear, do the thing you fear, and ask for the order. Expect sales resistance. Sales resistance is normal and natural in every sales conversation. At the moment of making a buying decision, this fear, this uneasiness, this tension starts to build up. Your job is to get through that moment of tension as quickly and as painlessly as possible. That's what good closing techniques are for. Just remember that closing techniques are not ways of manipulating other people. They are not techniques to get people to buy things they don't want, they don't need, can't use, and can't afford. They are techniques to help get people past that moment of tension. The professional salesperson takes the prospect smoothly past the point of closing, making it easy for the prospect to buy. The unprofessional salesperson sits there wishing and hoping, and at the end of the presentation, he says, "Well, what do you think? Have you ever done that? Well, what do you think?" And you know what the prospect says, right? His stress and tension starts to build. His heart starts pounding faster. His blood pressure increases. He feels the adrenaline pumping, and the fight or flight reaction comes over him. Finally, he says, "Well, I think I'd like to think it over. Or I think I have to talk it over with someone else. Even if he wants it, the tension is too great. This is why you must know how to ask a closing question. This tension on the part of the prospect that kills so many sales is why you must learn how to close smoothly and well. This is why you must know a series of closing techniques.